Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Zajac learning Gemara and Metalis and Tefilla the way it used to be. Good. Very good. Zajac, you look very holy. I'm scared. You're good? You're good, Baruch Hashem. Okay. All right. Stay off. Wake up. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Chav Zayin. I'm dedicating this class Le'ili Nishmas, my dear father, whose third yard site is today. That's Harav Mordechay ben Harav Simcha Yitzchak. May his neshama have an Aliyah. Amen. We are starting today the third chapter, Bakoil Me'arvin. As we mentioned yesterday, the third chapter is going to be speaking about items that may or may not be used to make an eruv. And as we're going to learn the Mishnah with Rashi, the Mishnah is going to be referring to both Eruv Chatzeros and Shitut Muvois and an Eruv Tchumen. In other words, we spoke up until now about how to physically enclose an area for it to be no longer Ereshus Harabim, for it to be at least biblically Ereshus Hayachid. Then we learned about a Mavui, which is Ereshus Hayachid Midoraisa, but you have to add additional partitions. So it's all about the physical enclosing of an area. Now we're learning about an area that's already enclosed. And Mavui, Chatzeros, Elama, as we mentioned, that Shlomo HaMelech does not allow people to carry from Ereshus Hayachid that is belonging to one owner or to some owners to another Ereshus Hayachid that belongs to other owners. And the way they all merge together is by them all participating with food, placing it in one living location, with many more details as we'll explain when we go through the Masechta. Similarly, there's a concept of an Eruv Tchumen, whether it is Midoraisa L'shitas Rabbi Akiva, that one may not walk beyond 2,000 amas from his or her Makim Hashvisa, whether that 2,000 amma limit is only Midrabanan, there is a way to extend the area to which you may walk, and that is either to do what we will call ma'arev beraglav, if a person prior to Shabbos physically goes to a location. Then, when Shabbos comes in, they are in that new location, so they only start counting the 2,000 amas from where they physically are. That's a technical, simple way of making it, of extending the area to which you can walk. And then you have this concept of even if I am physically in my same home, but if I send food, and we'll see here what foods could be used, what foods may not be used, then we can say that if my intent, if my das is to take in Shabbos where my food is, it's keilu, that is where I took in Shabbos. You only have 2,000 amas, but you begin counting it from the place of your food. So that's called Eruv Tchumen. So the Mishnah is going to speak about foods that may or may not be used for all types of Eruvin. The Mishnah is going to give you everything could be used, chutz min hamayim u min hamelach. So we're going to already speak about other halachis relating to mayim and melach, which will be the link into Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni money has to be used to buy food. So what foods could it be used for? Everything other than water and salt. The Gemara is going to introduce the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein lemeidim min haklolois. Guys, klolois here is not with a kuf, not a curse. Klolois is a klal, a rule. Ein lemeidim min haklolois means that we cannot learn categorical rulings from a klal. Those when the Chazal say there is a rule, there's always exceptions, says Rabbi Yochanan. And that is true even if Chazal said a rule and they said the word chutz. So you would think if they themselves are acknowledging an exception, they're going to mention all the exceptions. And anything that's not mentioned in the exception is not to be excluded from the rule. Says Rabbi Yochanan, that's not the case. Even when they give a klal and they say chutz, there may always be even more exceptions, as we'll speak out, related back to our Mishnah. We're going to therefore speak about klalim that we spoke about women, the mitzvahs that women are obligated, the mitzvahs that women are exempt of. Chazal also gave exceptions. We'll see that there are even more exceptions. We're going to learn some rules about a zav, the unique koyach of a zav to impart Tuma, and then we're going to spend a big part of the daf learning about Meiser Sheni. Indeed, when you have produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael that were separated as that which was separated from Meiser Sheni, either take that itself to Yerushalayim and eat it only there, or Kiyirchak, you are allowed to sell that Meiser Sheni or exchange it on coins. The coins have to be taken, the money has to be taken to Yerushalayim, but you only may buy food. What may you not buy? So we're going to learn a Machloikas Tanoim, whether you can buy fish brine. We're going to begin with Tanoim that all agree that fish itself may be purchased with the money of Meiser Sheni, obviously to be eaten in Yerushalayim. And then we're going to learn other Tanoim that don't even allow you to buy fish itself. It has to be Peta. And we're going to learn all of this. All of these shitas are based on a pasuk that we have in the A. The pasuk first uses a general expression, then it gives a couple of examples, then it goes back to a general exception. And this will really depend on B'chlal. How do you learn? Do you learn klal, prato klal, or do you learn riboy, miut, riboy? I know they both basically mean the same things, but they're not the same. If you view a general word and you use the system of riboy and miut and riboy, you're going to end up with a lesser of a limitation. You will end up including more. Whenever you use the concept, the shita, the derech halimud of klal, prato klal, you will end up excluding more, as we'll see in our case, by Meiser Sheni, you will exclude, according to the klal, prato klal, that you may not even buy fish itself with that money. It has to be something that grows from the ground itself. Okay, Chavra, let us start on Daf Chavav Amid Beis by the Mishnah. Starting again, Perek Shlishi, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shachar Kol Yibdori. It's a jam-packed daf manish. Ba'koil ma'arvin. Look inside Rashi. Clearly, we're speaking both about Eruvei Chatzeros, right? And then we have and Eruvei Tchumen. And the Mishnah speaks about Shituf Mavais, Mishtatvim. So we're speaking about peoples that are merging ownership, or someone that is halachically changing his makim hashvisa through food. All foods may be used, chutz min hamayim min hamelach, not water nor salt. According to many Rishonim, we have to use something that is zun, that will give you nutrition, and water and salt do not nourish you. We're not saying that it's not important. You cannot live without water. Salt also gives a lot of koyach to the body, but it doesn't give nourishment. Furthermore, says the Mishnah, similarly, if you have money that you used to be paid the produce, that's Meiser Sheni. That money has to be taken to Yerushalayim, and you have to buy food and drink with it. So what type of food? All types of food. Chutz min hamayim min hamelach, other aside of water and salt. Again, since they do not nourish, it's not considered for this part of the Torah as food. Another din, says the Mishnah, hanoider min hamazoin. The person makes a vow not to consume anything that nourishes him or her. So then, again, mutter, we're going to go with the girs of the Messiah Sashas, but mayim umelach. They only made a vow not to eat, not to consume something that is zun, something that nourishes them. We're being consistent. Mayim or melach halachically does not nourish you. Okay, so these are the three cases where mayim and melach share the same rule. Now we're going back to an eruv. Now let's speak about it. Let's say an eruv tchumen. An eruv tchumen means that since you left food there, it's as if you took in Shabbos there. All bamed v'namamurim that you are able to consume, you have access to that food. You can take that food. You won't be breaking any halachas by taking and consuming that food. So now the question is, can a nazir use wine for his eruv? A nazir, because of his nazir vow, may not consume any grape product. Says the Mishnah that a nazir could use yayin for his eruv, and a Yisrael could use truma for the Yisrael's eruv. We'll see in the Gemara why. Even though they may not consume it, but they can use it. However, Sumchas disagrees, but only with the truma part. And he says, no, a Yisrael must use chulin. And the obvious question is, why didn't Sumchas also argue with the nazir using yayin? Evidently, he holds that a nazir could use yayin. Why? All this will leave for the Gemara. Now let's go to another detail. Not a food that might pose a halachic issue of you consuming it, where you placed it. a kohen midrabanan cannot go into an area that's known as a beis hapras. A beis hapras is an area that we know there used to be a person buried there, and they plowed over the field, and it's possible that the body, the bones of the body were plowed into, and the fragments of the bone were spread in an area in the field. And indeed, 100 amas in each direction from where the caver was, that is going to be called a beis hapras. And even though that there's no more tumas oil, because you don't have enough of the mace, right, to impart tumas oil, but there might be a fragment of a bone on top of the ground, and a bone of a corpse is mitztama even in the most minute size, and the kohen might touch it, so to prevent that, he may not walk in there. So says the Mishnah that a kohen could place the eruv techumen in a beis hapras. He may not get it. So the answer is that under certain circumstances, Chazal allows a kohen to walk into this beis hapras. The whole chashash is there might be a fragment of the bone mamish on the ground that he might touch. And the solution there is that if he has a means through which he can blow the ground right in front of him before he places his foot down, that means that even if there is a little fragment of the bone that you can't discern with your eyes, because it's that little, it will be blown away. It's called Aliyah nipuach. Then you are allowed to walk there. So since there is a way for him to walk in the beis hapras, it's valid for him to have his eruv techumen placed over there. Rabbi Yehuda goes even more, that you can place an eruv techumen for a kohen even in a beis hakvaros. Again, a kohen may not enter a proper cemetery, because there's also a way for him to go in there. He can create something that will make a chatzitza between him and the graves beneath him. For example, Rashi says if a kohen goes into a agola, today it would mean to go into a car, and the car is going to separate halachically between him and the environment around him. So since there are ways for him to enter a beis hakvaros halachically, therefore you may place for the kohen the food of his eruv techumen even in a beis hakvaros. Okay, so a lot more in the Gemara later about the latter part of the Mishnah. We're going to begin with the first klal, that you can use any food for an eruv, ma'koil ma'arvin, chutz min hamayim u'min hamelech. So you would think that these are the only two exceptions. And as the Gemara is going to teach us, it's not the case. There are other exceptions as well. All right, says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this is Gavaldik. Ein lemeidim min haklalos. We cannot learn a categorical ruling when Chazal gave a rule. When Chazal say, let me tell you a rule. Okay, we're not, God forbid, denying the rule. We are accepting the rule, but it's not categorical. That means that just because they gave a rule, it does not mean that there aren't exceptions. It doesn't mean there will always be exceptions, but there always could be exceptions. And Rabbi Yochanan says, "Va'afilu b'makim shenemar b'chutz." Even if Chazal themselves, when they gave the rule, they said, and there is an exception, whether it is 1 or 2 or 3, and they counted those chutz. So you would think that since they did not count number 5, they did not count number 6, so now we can have a categorical rulings. That's not true, says Rabbi Yochanan. Even when they say chutz, and they only mentioned as chutz, aleph and beis, it doesn't take away the possibility that there is a gimel, that there is a dalid. There always might be more exceptions. There may always be exceptions. That's his rule. Now, the Gemara first wants to analyze regarding what did Rabbi Yochanan say the statement. Obviously, it was not for our Mishnah, nor was it for any other Chazal where they themselves gave a chutz, because Rabbi Yochanan began a statement not regarding chutz. It was va'afilu b'makom shenemar b'chutz. His statement was for any other klal. Ein lemeidim en haklalos. So says the Gemara, midika amen afilu b'makom shenemar b'chutz. Is the charaya that the ikar statement of Rabbi Yochanan, the lav hachikoy, was certainly not in our Mishnah, nor certainly not in any other Mishnah or Braisa, where Chazal said chutz, because he began his rule for a klal without a chutz. So hey chikoy, regarding what did Rabbi Yochanan make a statement that ein lemeidim en haklalo, he says the Gemara Hassan koy, I know where, and we're going now to a Mishnah in Kiddushin. What does the Mishnah say? Kol mitzvahs aseh shazman gerama, all time-bound mitzvahs, men are obligated in, women is a klal, right? Nasham peturos. a klal. And by the way, the Mishnah there doesn't even say chutz. Likewise, says the Mishnah, if a mitzvah is not time bound, then echad nashim, the echad nashim chayavim, both women and men are chayiv. End of Mishnah, to which you can ask, what the klalahu? Is that a rule? Meaning, are there no exceptions? It's not true. And the Gemara gives you an example. Hadei matzah. Matzah is a bona fide mitzvah saseh shazman gerama. You have to eat matzah when? Not the whole Pesach. You're mechuyev to eat matzah the first night. Or us, chutz la'aretz, because of minig aviseinu biyodenu, we have it, we're mechuyev to have it the first 2 nights. And women are equally obligated like men. Simcha, really simcha is referring specifically to eating the meat of the korban shalmei simcha zachag. Right, when you go to Yerushalayim, aside of the oilas re'iyah, there are korbanos that the owners partake of. There is really in Masechta Rosh Hashanah machlokes between Abaye and Abzeda. Shitas Abaye is Isha Bala Mesamcha. That if the woman joins the husband is obligated to make her rejoice, to give her simcha, but it's not a chiyuv on her. That's Abaye. Our Gemara holds like Rav Zedam that a woman is mechuyev to have simcha zachag. Mitzvah saseh shazman gerama. Hakel, the mitzvah of assemblage that is always right in the beginning, Sukkot time, after the Shemitah year. Clearly, the Torah says explicitly it's a mitzvah on men, women. It's on men and women, and really on children and infants. But on the children and infants, there the chiyuv was on the parents to bring them. But if she's an adult, these are 3 examples. The mitzvah saseh shazman gerama. Nevertheless, women are obligated. Kasha number 1. Kasha number 2. The whole mitzvah saseh shalei hazman gerama nashim are chayavis. Is that a klal? V'harei Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah is a positive mitzvah that's not time bound. We have to learn day and night. And why are women exempt from the obligation of Talmud Torah? Guys, we have this in Kedushin, because since it says Vishinam Tom Livanecha, V'loi Livneisecha, so clearly the obligation to teach is from us on our sons. So the Gemara gives a klal that to whomever there's no obligation to teach, they are also absolved on their own from their obligation to learn. That we have in Kedushin. So they're not mechuyev. Piri v'rivya. Piri v'rivya is a mitzvah that's not on women. Why? Chazal tell us, because since in the pasuk of Pruruvu it says v'chivshua darkoi shel ish lichboish ve'ein darkoi shel ish lichboish. That's the Chazal. That's from there. From there, they learned that this obligation is only on men. Now, the Ran holds that not only do they get a mitzvah if they have a child, but they participate in the great mitzvah of Pruruvu. But don't confuse getting the reward of a mitzvah, getting connected to God by doing the mitzvah. Here we're speaking about mechuyev, not obligated. Pidyon haben. Pidyon haben, my friends, is a mitzvah saseh shaloi hazman gerama. Even though the mitzvah only goes into effect after 30 days go by, right? We do the Pidyon haben b'yom lamed aleph, but once it's yom lamed aleph, you are obligated to do a Pidyon haben. It doesn't stop. It's a mitzvah day and night. And if a person didn't do it b'yom lamed aleph, then the obligation keeps on going until the Pidyon happens. That's a mitzvah. Shaloi hazman gerama. Women are exempt because in the parsha of Pidyon haben it says tifdeh. Chazal make a play, they make a drush. Tifte tipade. Tipade means redeem yourself. Women are not mechuyev to redeem themselves because it's a mitzvah only on a ben. It's the same logic, the opposite of Talmud Torah. Here it's, since they're not mechuyev to redeem themselves, they're not mechuyev to redeem their sons. The mitzvah says shalei hazman gerama v'nashim p'turais. So Chazal gave a klal, but it's not true. There are exceptions. So on that said Rabbi Yechanan, and a chanami, ein a chanami. What's bothering you? Just because the Chazal give a klal, ein lemeidim min haklalos, ela amar Rabbi Yechanan ein lemeidim min haklalos, and then he added that Matilde v'makom shereba by chutz, even if Chazal said chutz, and they enumerated 1, 2, or whatever exceptions. So here you might think that something that was not enumerated by them as an exception should not be an exception, because if not, they would have included it. Oichet, says Rabbi Yechanan, ein lemeidim min haklalos, because something other than what they mentioned also might be excluded from the klal that they gave. So So that even where they said chutz, there are more chutz. There could be, and sometimes there are more exceptions. So here we're quoting a Mishnah regarding some laws of a zav. About a zav, kol shenisa al gabi hazav, anything that is going to be carried, that is on top of a zav. This is called Elyahu shel zav. Guys, normally there's something called tumas masa. You know what tumas masa means? That the source of tuma is on top, and someone is carrying the tuma. That's the classical carrying tuma. Here it's the opposite. The item that's being carried is tahor. The zav is the one that's tamei. Even if the zav has no physical contact with that which is above him, Elyahu shel zav, kol shenis al gabe hazav, becomes tamei like the zav, becomes an av that's unique to a zav. That's one kol, that's a klal. And then weiter, kol shazav nisa olav, anything that the zav is on, even though there's no physical touch, tahor, chutz, min harayil lemishkov u'moshav. Only if that item that's bearing the weight of the zav was something meant to be laid upon, or something made to be sat upon. Here also we know that that becomes an av, and the ha'adam, which means a person who carries a zav, if there's no touch, person was not meant to be sat upon. By the way, a person who carries a zav without physical contact does not become an av, but he'll become a rishon. These are the klalim that we have by zav. Now asks the Gemara, that's it, the suleka, v'ha'ika merkav. Tumas merkav. Merkav is something that the zav is riding upon. The Mishnah doesn't mention it. The Mishnah gives chutz, but there is another exception. And the Gemara just wants to clarify, hi merkav, when you're asking, isn't there another merkav? Hey chadami, idi yasav aleh, if it's something that the zav is sitting on, which is, let's say, a saddle, well, the Mishnah did mention it by speaking about moishav. So the Gemara says, no. Afanan hachi coming in. And my question was regarding this case, that ha'ika gabba ha'ukva, which is the upper part of a saddle. In English, it's called a pommel or a pommel. It's that part where whoever went horseback riding, so you have like this part of the saddle that you hop onto. It protrudes, it's like a handle. That was not meant to be sat upon. But if a zav sits on the saddle, that becomes an av. That's called already merkav, because it was something part of the merkav meant to be used as the merkav hazav. Therefore, it acquires, even if the pommel, okay, that's the din. And that's the kasha. Why didn't the Mishnah mention it? The Tanya ho'ukav tamei moishav, the saddle itself, if a zav sits on it, becomes an av, even if there was something even intervening between the zav and the saddle. If there was no physical contact, that's called tumas moishav. And vahatafus, that which was meant for him to grab. Now, if he grabbed it, yeah, he grabbed it, my friends, but that normally should only make the tafus, the pommel, become a rishon, because that's the way tuma normally is conveyed. It goes down a notch. But since it's part of the saddle, it acquires tumas merkav, it becomes an av itself. To make merkav. So here you see that the Mishnah gives klalim, the Mishnah says chutz, and there is yet another exception. Now, like Rabbi Yochanan Taka says, now why are we bringing the sugi here for the next line? I have another proof, and that is from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah begins with a klal. Any food can be used, or any food can be used for a shitur. And the Mishnah gives exceptions. So you would think that these are the only exceptions, because if there would be more, the Mishnah would have included it in the chutz. But it's not true. Truffles, not truffles here in the nash store. Truffles, real truffles, and mushrooms. Here, being that's the way the Rishonim learn. They are hardly ever used as a main dish in the times of Chazal. Because of that, they may not be used for an eruv. No one is, whether that's the reason, other Rishonim give other reasons. The point is, everyone agrees that there are more exceptions. Our Mishnah did not mention it. So if you were to learn Pshat and Chazal give a klal, then they say chutz. If something is not mentioned in the chutz, then it's categorical. It's not true. There are more dinim. There are more exceptions. There are always exceptions. Okay. now that we mentioned mayim and melech that may not be used for an eruv, the Mishnah says that when you buy with ma'os ma'aser sheni food in Yerushalayim to eat it in Yerushalayim, you can buy anything chutz min hamayim v'hamelech. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, this is the Amoira. Rabbi Yossi ben Abchanina, Chad, one of them, Masni, they learned our din chutz min hamayim v'hamelech regarding an eruv. I'm sorry, they learned a qualification. We didn't teach. They taught something about the chutz min hamayim v'hamelech regarding eruv. We're going to see soon what they taught. Another one of these two gave a qualification regarding the chutz umayim v'hamelech, but regarding ma'aser, which is ma'aser sheni. Now we explain what are we talking about. Chad masnia eruv. That what? That lo yishanu ela mayim b'fnei atzmai umelech b'fnei atzmai. Let's say regarding the eruv, when may water or salt not be used? If it's water or salt, or even if it's water and salt, but they're not mixed together. That is weird, taka ein ma'arvin, because they don't nourish. Abel b'mayim umelach. But the moment you mix salt in water, now it has more chashivus. And Rashi says it has more chashivus because when people eat bread, they like dipping their bread into salt water. So now that it has a chashivus, even though it doesn't have now new nutritional value, still doesn't nourish, but because of its chashivus, it could be used for an eruv. Whether it is for an eruv, again according to Rashi, eruv chatzeres, shituf mavois, and an eruv tuchumen. And another one learned this qualification, a bigger chiddush, even regarding ma'aser sheni. Guys, ERUVIN, all ERUVIN is midrabanan. Ma'aser sheni are dinei doiraisa. That even though ma'aser sheni, you have to buy produce with the moist ma'aser sheni. We'll see noch examples that the pasuk gives. But if you have someone who already mixed the salt in the water, then the kachin, then you can buy it because of ma'aser sheni. So when you see before Pesach liters salt and water, he sells them. You already have this in the Gemara. They were selling salt and water. I thought it's something unique in America. But yeah, you can't mix the salt and the water. No, you want to buy the salt and the water together. Once you mix it together, it's more chashuv. So it's a gavaldic ways of making a living, right? You buy salt and water is very cheap. You can't even use it for an eruv. The moment you mix it together, you got something very important. Now the Gemara says like this: that man the masna ma'aser, the one who learned this qualification regarding ma'aser sheni, that you may use ma'aser sheni to buy salt water, then certainly that shita will hold that you can use mixed salt water to make an eruv, because ma'aser sheni, like we mentioned, its limitations is midoiraisa. If this already gives it chashivus, allowing you to do a din doiraisa, certainly it's good for din derabanan. However, but then abel amaiser, when it comes to ma'aser sheni, why? Because as we'll see today in Amid Beis, you need to have peta. We're going to go through the examples the Torah gives in the pasuk in the A about what you need to use the money for, and whether you're going to learn. We're going to see klal upratu klal. Whether you're going to have a ribui miut, ribui, derech halimud, you're not going to end up with salt water. That is something that is not included in that which you may use the money for. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak, he learned this din even regarding ma'aser. That ma'aser sheni may be used to buy salt water. And now, okay, he's not the only one, first of all. At least we know it's Rabbi Yitzchak and one of the above two. And the Gemara is going to challenge the whole thing. How can it be? How can there even be a shita that allows for you to use money for salt water? Meisvei. What's the kasha from? Where is the kasha from? From the following brayso. Hey, Rabbi Yehuda ben Godish in front of Rabbi Eliezer, that shall base Abba. This is Rabbi Yehuda ben Godish's household. That in my home, because of ma'aser, that we allowed ourselves to use the money of ma'aser sheni to buy fish brine, not the fish itself, but the yoach that comes out of the fish, right? The yellow gook in the kedem jars that you can use ma'aser sheni for. Omar Loy, Rabbi Eliezer tells him, Shema Loy Shamata, doesn't make sense. Maybe what you remember from your family was that inside the tzir, there was some substance of fish. Shema Loy Shamata Ela Shekirei Dagim Mu'urav Bayim. At least some fish innards were mixed into the tzir. In other words, he was Maida, Rabbi Eliezer is Maida, that if there's some fish there, you can use the money for fish. And once you get the fish, I know you're spending more money to buy the fish with the brine, but you're buying fish. But if there's no fish at all, just to use it for the fish brine, it's already something so not food. How can you use the money for? That's the end of the back and forth. So the Gemara says, let's understand the Braisa. Bafilu Rabbi Yehuda ben Godish, who does allow tzir, at least because the tzir, guys, you know what tzir is? Fish brine. It's water and salt that fish soaked in for a long time. Maybe there's some oil, but it's vacant. It's melech. It says he only allowed only tzir because at least there was some of the fat, since fish was soaking in that water and salt. So he holds it's still more chashuv. All of that implies that if it was no fish were ever in there, no one will allow you to use, no one meaning none of these two Tanaim, not even the more lenient one, not even Rabbi Yehuda ben Godish, will allow you to spend mois sheni just for Mayim Melech, even if they're mixed together. That's the kasha. So the answer is the Gemara, you can't refute Rabbi Yitzchak from this Braisa, because Amar Rabbi Yosef daf chav zayin on the base loim that nitzracham. According to him, the case of the Braisa will be Elo shenasan litoichan shemen. What is the case? What is the case of the Braisa? When does Rabbi Yitzchak say? When does Rabbi Yitzchak hold that if water and salt are mixed together, you could use mois ma'aser sheni? That is only if there's also oil inside of it. Now, hold on. Let's say there's a little bit of oil. That oil you would have paid $1 for. Now that oil is mixed with water and salt, you're paying $5 for it. So really, you're spending the money for the mayim u'melech, or you're paying $2 for it. But when you are buying that product with mois ma'aser sheni, you're buying oil. You're paying more for the oil because in it is swallowed. It's called havla'a mayim u'melech. So Rabbi Yitzchak is machadesh that since oil is something that you can buy, even though you're spending more money, because you're really also buying the mayim u'melach, but as long as you're buying the oil, then behavla'a, you can also pay money extra for the mayim u'melach, as long as it's not mentioned. That's the concept of havla'a. Says the Gemara, Amalei Abaye v'tepuk lei mishum shemen. Hold on, if Rabbi Yitzchak is only allowing you to buy with mois ma'aser sheni oil and water and salt, then what's the chiddush? You can buy oil. Everyone agrees you can buy oil with mois ma'aser sheni. So the Gemara says, no, there is a chiddush here. It's needed. If there only would have been oil, it would have paid $1. Now that there's oil and water and salt all mixed together, the guy's charging $1.20. Doesn't matter, $1.50. And really, Taka, we are concluding that based on the Braisa, no one holds you can buy water and salt, even though they're mixed together. But if water and salt has also oil mixed in it, as long as you are buying the oil, even though you're paying money more for the oil, you're adding money to the oil. Really, you're adding more money because of the mayim u'melach. We say, no, you bought the oil, and b'havla, you can buy the mayim u'melach. This is a concept that's used throughout. If you just want a quick example, there's something called schar Shabbos. We learned about this in the last Masechta. It means even if you made up before Shabbos that a guy should come to your house, a cleaning lady, and work 2 hours on Shabbos, you made up before Shabbos. You're paying them after Shabbos. Midoraisa, you did nothing wrong. We prefer not to do that. We prefer not to pay someone schar Shabbos for work that they only did on Shabbos. But people do that the whole time. So how do we circumvent the issue? By having that cleaning lady work at least another hour after Shabbos. So let's say she worked for you for 3 hours, 2 hours on Shabbos, even if the Rev is, and 1 hour after Shabbos, you're paying her for 3 hours. You're not paying her only for Shabbos. You're paying her for the X amount of hours that she worked. Some of it is after Shabbos. You are swallowing in also the hours that she worked on Shabbos. So b'havla, we can pay. By the way, people happen to be a little bit lenient in this din. There are many people that make a living by being a Bal Koira. This is a minig Yisrael. Or by being a Bal Tefilla, even if they only do their service on Shabbos. So there's reasons why people are, to begin with, not that machmer when it comes to Schar Shabbos. But whenever it's possible to be mavliya it, by them doing any other service during the week, that's called avla. Okay, so where are we at, Chevra? that according to Rabbi Yitzchak, and perhaps according to the first two opinions that we mentioned, one of them holds that if mayim umelach are me'uravim, that it's good even from mois sheni lav dafka directly, but only if you're really buying shemen b'havla, you're including them. Says the Gemara b'havla mishari, even that, is that okay? Or says in ya b'havla it's muter. Ve'hatanya, that's v'nichusa ben bagbag oimer. Oh, here we have a ben bagbag. Now here, the pasuk is a pasuk in a pasuk of Ma'aser Sheni. That's the parsha that we read on Yom Tov, that if we're going to be blessed and we'll have a lot of produce and we'll live far from Yerushalayim and it's going to be difficult to take the food. So number one, we can exchange the kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni produce on the tzarta, not on a block of gold, but dafka on coins. And then the Torah says v'nosato hakesev. Then you take the money and you go to Yerushalayim, and what do you spend it for? A classical, either klal prato klal or ribui miyut ribui. The pasuk says, "B'chol asher ta'ava nafshcha," anything that your heart desires. Then the pasuk gives specific examples: babakar, which is cattle; ubatsoin, which is either sheep or goats; bayayin, wine. Shecher here doesn't mean beer. Shecher here means old wine. We'll see soon in the Gemara what it refers to. And then the pasuk concludes, "Ubechol asher tish'olcha nafshecha," and anything that your soul asks for. So that's the pasuk. So when Bagbag says that when the pasuk says babakar, and we'll see soon why babakar is extra. The pasuk began, you can buy anything, b'chol asher ta'ava nafshecha, any food that you desire to eat. Of course, that includes a steak. Of course, that includes a bakar, cattle. So malamed, that you can buy bakar al gav oiroi. You can purchase the animal with the money while it's alive, even though when you purchase a bakar, when you purchase a live animal, what are you buying? Well, the iked, you're buying the meat, but you're also buying its hide. The hide has value. The hide you don't eat. No one says, oh, you bought the animal with Ma'aser Sheni money? Okay, shecht it. Use the food for consumption. Take the oil and sell it. Sell the hide, and then with the money, buy more food. We don't say that. Since when you bought the bakar, you bought the ikir, the bakar to eat. The fact that behavla, the fact that you are also getting the hide, since you did not buy the hide, you bought the whole package, it doesn't bother us that behavla, you are getting a non-food item and you don't have to sell the oil. You can end up using the oil for whatever you want. That's the source that havla is allowed even by Ma'aser Sheni. Furthermore, when it says batsoin, again, like Rashi says, the pasuk already gave a klal, malame, another type of havla, and that is shaloich chinsoin al gabagizasa, that when you buy sheep, you can buy it while it was ladened with wool. Again, wool you don't consume, ladened with wool. Here we go. And you can buy that same concept. You're not buying the wool, you're buying the whole package. You're buying it for food, and if with it comes another non-food item, it doesn't bother me. But yayin means when you buy wine, you can buy it in a bottle. And today maybe glass is a lot cheaper. Glass in the times of Chazal was expensive. So, or even if kankan means a barrel, when you buy Ma'aser Sheni, you buy a barrel of wine, you don't have to sell the barrel later and buy more food. No, once you have the barrel, you can keep the barrel. You didn't buy the barrel, you bought the whole package. It's bahavla'a with the food. Uba sheichar, older wine, different wine. Here Chazal say, ben bagbag malamed, shaloichen temed mishehechmetz. So when wine is made, so we fully use out the grapes. After the grapes produce the max wine that it could, and you have all the dregs and the shemarim, so they used it even more. They would soak it in water, not only for the water to get some sort of coloring of the wine, but if you soaked it long enough, it began to ferment. So there was a little bit of an alcoholic input in the water, and that was called temed. Temed is a very schwach wine. So even temed water, you can't use Ma'aser Sheni. Even if it has the red color, you still cannot use it. Uba shecher means that once it begins to ferment, it's already more chashuv than water, and that may be purchased with Ma'aser Sheni. So here we see Taka Bahavla's mutter, and that explains how the Braisa doesn't contradict, and we clarified this whole concept of mixing water and salt for Ma'aser Sheni, not exactly. For Eruv, yeah, To eat, yeah, for selling a Pesach, gesund to eat. But for Ma'aser Sheni, even if you mix it together, you can't spend the money. But if you put some oil in it and you charge for the oil, then you can charge even extra. Now, Rabbi Yechanan wants to analyze this Ben Bagbag. And he had a kasha that bothered him, a kasha to which he had no answer for, and he made the following statement. Whoever will take away my challenge, my kasha that I have on this chazal, I'll be so happy with him that I will carry his clothing after him when he goes to bathe. I'll become his gabbai. I'll become his misharis. Because if he can answer this question, it means he's greater than me. And there's a big inyan to be mishamesh, a Talmud chacham. My tameh, meaning what bothered Rabbi Yechanan. So all of these examples that Ben Bagbag gave, all of them, aside of the Sheikhar, the first three, Babakar and Batsoin, Ubayayin, was a certain nuance in Havla'ah. But why did the Torah have to teach it 3 times? So we're going to go Milmata Lamail and then Milmata Lamail. Milmata Lamata, we're going to go down and up. So let's begin. So first of all, says Rabbi Yechanan, I acknowledge that when you properly analyze it, I'm going to show you that at the end of everything, from the 4 examples that the Torah mentions, Babakar, Batsoin, Bayayin, Ubasheichar, at the end, the Babakar will remain superfluous. And I don't understand why, indeed, the Torah mentions. So he begins. I'll explain you what I mean. If the Torah only would have written the Bakar to teach you the din of Havla'ah, it would not be enough. Because one would say, Havamina, that you know why I'm allowed to buy cattle with Moiz Ma'aser Sheni, even though I'm buying the hide. And no, I don't have to at the end sell the hide and buy food with its money. I can keep the hide because the bakar hu the misdabein al gabe oiroi. You can buy the bakar with its hide because the hide is an integral part of the cattle. It's part of the animal. If you take the hide off the animal when it's living, it's painful. You might even kill the animal. Mishum de gufeyu. So since when you bought the bucket, it was be'ikir meat, anything that's an integral part of it is havla'ah. I get that. But maybe if you buy tzoin sometimes can mean goats. Here it means sheep. If you're going to buy tzoin, al gab gizasa, and saying that you can buy it with the wool, maybe the wool is not an integral part of the sheep, which it's not. V'haraya, you can share it when the animal is living. Maybe that's considered something separated, and that's not something you can use any Ma'aser Sheni money for. And if you paid for that sign, and that did include the wool, maybe that has to be sold to make it into more money to buy more food. So that's a chiddush. Good. At least Havamina, why do we allow Havla? Because at the end of the day, it's not an integral part of, but the wool was physically connected to the body before you share it off. But when it comes to wine, al-gav kankanoi, when you buy wine in a barrel, wine in a bucket, wine in a glass bottle, since they're not physically connected, maybe we don't allow havla to allow you at the end of the day to keep the bottle of wine. So that's another chiddush. Havamina, you know why you can allow the bottle to be included? Because it is connected. How is it connected? The way you protect the wine is by putting it in the barrel. Wine, even now, when you buy in glass bottles, I'm not talking about the sweet, what they call wine. Emerson wine, it comes in a colored bottle. It protects the wine from becoming soured, from becoming chometz. But still, you would argue that can I buy temed with moist Ma'aser Sheni? I know that it has a certain reddish color. Yeah, there is a certain amount of alcohol in it, but so what? It's just the kiyua ba'almu. It's only as an acid of the grapes. There's so little of the grapes in it. It's not called the ayin. It's mayim. Mayim you can't buy. So first, Rabbi Yechanan went milmayla lamata on the seder. Each one has a greater novelty. But now, whenever you have such an ebaloi, so kasav rachmana even sheikha. And now a classical chazal. Well, if you're going on the order of a greater chiddush of leniency, so only mention the last one. Right now, we always go in the reverse. So if the last one is the biggest novelty, only mention the greatest novelty, and I on my own will extrapolate all the rest. So now Rabbi Yochanan goes backwards. Only that you can use Ma'is Sheni even for Temed after it became fermented. I would say Sheikhar doesn't mean Temed. Sheikhar means something intoxicating. I would think Sheikhar refers dafka to Devela Ki'ilis. In the area of Ki'ilah, they had pressed figs that was mamish. It's like the Rambam nash today, that they have rum in it, they have mashk in it. There was a certain type of pressed fig that was mamish intoxicated. It was meshaker. And maybe Meiser Sheni has to be used dafka to buy paytas. When if the trader only would have mentioned Sheikhar, I would have thought that it's referring to this fruit that's meshaker. Abul Yayin, especially Al Gaf Kankanoi, who says Emaloi? So therefore, we're going backwards. So Sheikhar would not have been enough. So the trader needed to write the words Yayin. And Yayin is to teach you the din of Avlah. And if you buy wine in a barrel, you can keep the barrel. Because you know why you can keep it? Because the barrel is needed. Because it protects the wine for it not becoming vinegar. If people share their shepsalach, it doesn't need the wool for protection. It's less needed. A maloi, if you did buy wool, a sheep with its wool, maybe you have to now sell the wool and use its money for food. So the trader tells you sign that feel like sus. But now that we have that, babakar lamali. Now Rabbi Yochanan is stuck. The first one is superfluous. The chi tema. And why is that? Logically, because if even when it comes to wool is not an integral part of the animal, we allow the concept of havla'ah, then for sure by cattle, you're buying it with its hide. Of course you can keep the hide. It's havla'ah, it's muvla, it's included, it's an integral part of the animal. We would have known it. And if you're going to say that if the trader would not have written the word babakar, then I would have wrongly interpreted sign, that sign is teaching you another notch, another level of havlah, but not sign with the wool, sign with the hide of the sign. I would have said that. But so I would have known hide from sign, but I wouldn't have known that you can keep also the wool, and wool is less integral. So therefore, the Torah needed to write babakar. Now that we have babakar, that's coming to include oiroi, that's megale, that by the tzoin is including even the gizasa. Maybe that's the answer, says Rabbi Yochanan. That's not the answer. No, because Eloi kasav rachman bakar, if the Torah would not have written bakar, I wouldn't have said that tzoin is meaning only to include the hide. And lav dafka, you are allowed to keep later the wool. Why would I not have said so? Because the im came, because if that would have been the kavan of God Almighty, then he wouldn't have mentioned soin. He only would have mentioned bakar. Because b'chlal bakar doesn't have any wool. And if the Torah is only allowing you using the tool of havlah for the hide, then the Torah would have written bakar and yayin and sheikhar. The memela yater leit soin. So since the Torah does pick sign, even if not writing bakar, it means sign. What's unique about sign is the wool. And once the Torah is megali that you can keep the wool because of havlah, then I know by myself that you can for sure keep the hide because it's gufay, it's an integral part. So that's the kasha. So babakar lamali. Hash the tzoin al gabe gesosim is davno. So bakal gabe edemi boyem. Chveis nish why. And indeed, the hainu the ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan man the betargam li babakar alibed men bagbag is my vilna money libe masusam. Okay, the Gemara doesn't have an answer. We just clarified the kasha of Rabbi Yochanan. Now, what did we learn? Let's come back to it. Still by Ma'aser Sheni, that you can use the money to buy fish. Only question is, can you use the money only to buy the tzir? Only to buy the yoich. So machloikas tanoim. So says the Gemara that I want you to know there are other tanoim that don't even allow you to use the money for fish. So really there's a machlokes tanoi between the two that we learned on Amadalav, which is Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer. Both agree that if there's even only the innards of the fish, some pieces of fish, you could use money ma'aser sheni, because there's some fish there. There are other tanoim that don't allow you to buy a nice carp, even that not. The question is, what's underlying that argument? Second to last line in the narrow lines. But Michael Miflige on one side, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer, and on the other side, the other Tanaim that we'll mention in a moment, with the first white line that hold that you may not even buy fish with mois ma'aser sheni. And the answer will be Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer. Whenever the Torah formulates a mitzvah in generalizing, specifying and generalizing, they use what's called in English the amplification limitation, that a chalimud, darshe ribuye umeyute. This is something that we have throughout Shas again and again. And then you end up with a greater, you end up with a broader inclusionary mitzvah. You apply it to more. Yes, you limit it, but the limitation is limited. The limitation is limited. And v'hani tanoi that don't even allow you to buy fish, they use the derech halimud known as klal pratu, klali uprati, right? Generalizations, specifications. You end up limiting more. You end up staying with items that have to be closer to the specification. And now the Gemara teaches. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish Rabbi Eliezer darshi riboy miyutei. The pasuk begins. We quoted the pasuk above. V'nosata hakesev b'choil asher ta'ava nafshecha. You can use the money of ma'aser sheni in Yerushalayim for food, for anything that your soul desires, for anything. That's riba, right? That's the word. It amplifies. Anything should be included. Then the Torah gives 4 limitations, which was as we learned above. Bakar, tzoyin, yain, sheichar. That's a miyat. That's a limitation. Then the pasuk right away closes it by weiter amplifying an amplification, where it says, quoting, anything that your soul asks for. So chazav riba. So riba umiyat riba hakoil. My Rabbi komili. Any edible has to be food, but any food. My miyat. Oh, so here we have a nuance. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you can buy fish. Guys, fish is not bakar, fish is not soin, fish is not yayin, but it's food. It's an edible. Elama, what can you not buy? Seed, fish brine. There's nothing substantial in there. There's no food in there. It came from food. It has the shemen of food, but it's not food. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish, even seed you can buy. There has to be something that's going to be limited. So that's back to the din in our Mishnah. Mi'et mayim umelach, because it doesn't nourish, or for other reasons that the Rishonim give. However, the other tanoim that we're going to mention in a moment that clearly don't even allow you to buy fish, hani tanoi, they use the same pasuk, but their derech halimud is known as darshi klali uprati di tanya. Now, guys, we're going to learn 2 braises. And we're not going to finish the whole sugya, but they both have the commonality that they use the derech halimud of klal upratu klal. But we're going to have to understand exactly what the argument is within the following 2 braises. So braisa number 1, that's a generalization. Then we have the 4 pratim, the 4 specifications. Then the pasuk says, so this is called klal upratu klal. And what is the rule? You end up with a more limited limud, with a more specified limud. And what is that? Mahaprat, which is babakar, ubatsoin, bayayin, ubashechad, is number 1, pri mipri, a fruit that is being reproduced with its own seed. A food item that is reproducing itself with its own seed. Now, this includes animals. This includes trees. By the way, this in itself also should include fish. Primi pri, like Rashi teaches 7 lines from the bottom. Egel noilad me'imoy, b'chein seh, va'anavim mechartzanim. You know, it's a product that has in its seeds that reproduces itself. And number 2, the giduli karka. Something that's nourished off the ground. My friends, nourished off the ground, not growing off the ground. Not growing. A seh, right, a bakar is not what you would call gidule karka. It eats off the ground. So do fish. So far, we didn't exclude fish. L'chora. So af kol pri the gidule karka could be used with mais sheni. V'tanya idach brayso number 2. We're going to see in a moment what's the difference between 1 and 2. Ma haprat mefurish, which is velad. It's foods. Velad here means food, which is velad sa'aretz, that are generated by the earth. Generated by the earth. Af kol velad velad sa'aretz. It has to be something that's generated from the earth. Now, guys, hold on. Generated from the earth. How is bakar generated from the earth? Says Rashi, yes, look inside the Chumash. During the 6 days of creation, from where did all animals come from? From the earth. The earth itself metamorphosed into the bodies of the animals. That's called Vlad Velodois Haaretz. And now this for sure will exclude fish, because in Sheishes Yemei Bereishis, the bodies of the fish came from the water. Hashem formed the water into the bodies of the fish. My benayu, the first attempt between the two braises, Amar Abaya Dagim. It means, according to Abaya's initial approach, even from these two latter Tanoim that use klal or prato klal, not all of them exclude fish. Giduli karka means nourished from the earth. Hani dagim, giduli karka, they eat in the sea from that which comes out of the earth. But something that's generated from the earth doesn't only mean trees, it means animals, because originally during Sheishes Yemei Bereishis, the bodies of the animals came from the earth. Dagim mimayim. Says the Gemara, Umi Amar Abaya Dagim Gedule Karka. It can be. Dagim are not Gedule Karka. You don't say that halachically they're considered Gedule Karka. We know they don't grow from the earth, but we don't halachically say that they get nourished from the earth. Here we're speaking about how many lavin are you going to get? How many sets of malchus will you get for eating different types of shiratzim? So there's a certain putisa aquatic creature, for if someone eats it, they're going to get 4 times malchus. And like Rashi reminds us in the sugya here, even if the person doesn't eat the shiur of a kazayas, if you eat an entire creature called a beria, you're chayiv malchus. So you have 4 psukim for that. If a person eats an amal, and even though it's very little, but it's a beria, you're chayiv 5 sets of malchus. If a person eats a tzira, a hornet, a bee, you're chayiv 6 sets of malchus. Now potisa, like we mentioned, is a certain type of dog. It's an aquatic creature. The im isa, that anything that is a fish is still called gidule karka. Halachically, potisa nami loka mishum hasheretz hashoyretz al haaretz. So since we don't apply the concept of hashoyretz al haaretz to an aquatic creature, nor can we apply the concept of gidule karka to an aquatic creature. So where are we at? We're going to stop over here, just to make it clear. The moment you use the klal uprato klal, you also exclude the permissibility of using the money of Ma'aser Sheni to buy dugim. Elama, we have to simply clarify what is the nafkamina between the first and the second braisa. Now that we excluded fish is not gidule karka, even according to the first braisa, fish may not be purchased with Ma'aser Sheni. God willing, to be continued.
Shkoyach.
Guys.
Shkoyach. Rabbi.